Welcome back to Big Dan's Airgun Review channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Crosman Summit, very kindly provided to us by Rangerite. Thank you ever so much. Today we're going to be taking a look and obviously checking over the rifle's features, handling, as well as power and accuracy. I actually nagged them for this on multiple occasions. This one was not thrust upon me. This was my choice, so I do hope it's a good gun, otherwise I'm going to have egg on my face. I just thought that was a seriously pretty looking gun. And again, bear in mind it's a budget gun, and you even get the scope and obviously mount to go with it. So, Crosman Summit. Is it any good, or have I made a gigantic mistake? Let's find out. So, starting off at the rear, we of course have a rubber recoil pad. Ventilated this one as well, and quite nicely finished, it must be said. As we get to the cheek piece, I'm pleased to report it is an ambidextrous unit, so lefties rejoice. The other thing I'll mention is, isn't it pretty, the sculpturing as it goes into the grip, the comb as it sort of comes down and then almost comes back. Fetching bit of wood on this. It's only beech, but even that, the grain is really starting to pop through, and I think with a few coats of oil, this could be a really eye-catching little gun. We do also have some nicely styled checkering around the grip, but we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the handling section. As we come slightly further along, we get to the trigger. Now this is a two-stage adjustable unit. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the handling section and actually have the gun in the shoulder. And just in front of that you can see the safety toggle as well. Again, we'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on. Then as we come up a tad, you get to the dovetail rail, so you can fit your scopes and such on there, and also the scope and one-piece mount. Now I'm quite impressed with this at the moment because, number one, the one-piece mount is nice. Most package scopes usually only come with a little single screw mounts. Let's set a pair of them, which aren't always the best if we're honest with each other, and a non-parallax adjustable scope, whereas this is a 3-to-9x40 parallax adjustable unit. So could be something quite genuinely nice on there. We'll see when we get to the accuracy testing how the scope behaves. Then slightly further along with the forestock, we have got a bit more checkering. Again, we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the handling section of this video. Then as we get to the end of the barrel, we have got an enlarged cocking aid on the end here. The thing I quite like about this is the fact that it's actually not too in your face, which is the trap a lot of budget guns fall into when you're left with a great big glob of plastic on the end. With this, it's actually quite discreet, and I do quite like that, but again, we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the handling section. So in general, it's a good, honest break barrel spring gun. No major gimmicks, nothing like that on the go. Everything's respectfully placed, and in general, it's just hopefully going to be a good target gun or just an honest hunting gun. But we don't want to say too much until we get the gun in the shoulder and see how it feels. If it feels like you're shouldering an anchor, well, it doesn't matter how good and honest it is, you're chucking it straight in the bin. So let's put it in the shoulder and see what we think. Okay then, so handling. What do we think of the Crosman Summit? I really like it, to be honest. It just feels like a spring gun should. It's not too heavy, it's not too light, it's balanced well. If you can see there, it's pretty much 50-50 if I let go. So move it slightly further along, and now you can see it's tipping down. So it's pretty much right where we want it, almost dead set into the action here. It's a nicely balanced gun, and that is obviously, as you can tell, with the scope that's included with it. So let's get to the interesting bits now, which are, oh yeah, number one, I will mention this. So the stock, is it just me, or is that, if I haven't mentioned it already, a seriously pretty gun? Maybe it's just my sort of classical understated tastes, I don't know. But as soon as I looked at that, I was immediately on the phone to Rangerite saying, can I have a Crosman Summit, please? I mean, they've got all sorts of guns that they supply us with, all your Crowls, Reximexes, all that sort of space age gear. But I'm the sort of drip that looks at this and goes, oh, that's sexy. This is a bit of me. One thing I will mention is the checkering. We say stripper rules. Is it friendly in the way that yes, you can touch, or is it no, you look, you don't touch, stripper? It's stripper, sadly. It's not the deepest checkering on the planet. It is pretty, I will say that. If you can pick it up in the camera, that is anyway. It's a bit of an odd lighting day today, but it's not very thick. In fact, I'm putting quite a lot of pressure on that now, if you can see that. and there's still no real pattern on my thumb, if you can see that there. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, and it does actually shoulder. Despite that, it does feel really quite nice when you bring it up. So the fun bits. So now let's, oh, one thing I will mention if I haven't already, I don't usually like plastic on guns, especially not when it's a great big ugly lump of plastic on the end of the barrel. I picked on a lot of my favorite guns for this. For instance, the Remington Sabre, I believe we said about that great big plastic can on the end, and also the Cometa Phoenix and 300 off memory, which has the basketball cage sort of plastic lump on the end. If you're going to do plastic, do it the way Crosman's done it. That is actually quite nice. I will say that. There's no big chunky sights on the end or anything like that. It is literally a cocking aid. It's not pretending to be a silencer, at least I hope it's not, because it isn't. And it's just nicer than slapping your hand on the barrel. And as plastic goes, it is really quite nice and smooth. I will say that. So no plastic is good plastic, but this plastic ain't bad. So let's give that a tap. Cocking effort. Smooth as butter. In fact, it almost reminds me of cocking my beloved Cometa Fusion. How easy that is. That is smooth as silk. So typical break barrel affair. Pop your pellet in, return the barrel. Let's have a go. Little finger jobby. Butter. That is a really nice little action. So let's take aim now. Flick that safety off. Safety's not my... I do like it, but I don't. I like safeties in front of trigger blades. I'm a little 50-50 on this one because it's too close to the trigger blade. And I don't mean that in a safety reason. It's perfectly safe. Obviously you have to flick away to put the safety off anyway. The issue that I've got is you've got to kind of roll your finger to the side of the blade to then flick that safety off. Put it further away so I can get my finger behind it and then flick like that. It's just a little too close. My favourite safety, I think, is still what we had on the Zabroya rifles back in the day. That was perfect. We're rambling now, so let's get back to the Crosman. So, trigger. We've got a nice first stage. Going to second. Pulling. Pulling. Still going. Then it remembered what it was and fired. There's quite a bit of creep there. Let's just do that one more time. So let's give that another go. One thing I will say, there's a little bit of twang, if you heard that then, but to be honest, it's nothing bad at all. Not worth fretting about, to be fair. In fact, I'll put it this way, if you're going to complain about twang from this, you might as well complain about pretty much 50 or 60% of all the Virearcs out there, because they're comfortably louder than this thing is. So safety's off, taking aim, and watch the trigger finger if you can. If you can see that, there we go, put it a bit more that way. This is on the second stage, bear in mind. And that's it. One thing I will mention though, I want you to look at now, not a great deal of recoil on this. That's always an incredibly good sign. So let's give that another go. Pop one in there. Nice. Right, watch the muzzle if you can. So bear in mind I am not comfortable at this moment in time. I'm leaning back, my right arm's floating, resting on nothing. That's not bad at all, is it? That is a nice gun. The lock time feels nice and quick as well. It's a donk and then it's on the way. That to me, a couple of little things, like I say, safety, neither here nor there, to be honest. A couple of little things I'd like to change, like for instance the trigger. Obviously in an ideal world if it was metal as well it'd be nice. It is a plastic blade. And also maybe a bit of that creep, if we could tune that out of it, it would be lovely. Now it is an adjustable unit, so we will have a play with that and see if we can make any difference with it. The other thing I'll mention, and a lot of the tuners at home potentially watching this are probably licking their lips, and the people who like to tinker with their guns, because they know that that trigger unit, you can tell what it is by the blade, it's on quite a few budget guns and it is wickedly tunable, and with not a great deal of effort either. Literally just a longer adjustment screw takes up a lot of that slack and it turns into a really crisp little trigger. So out the box, could be better. It had a lot worse as well though, but could be better. But at the same time, it is sort of a diamond in the rough. You can play with that and make it real nice. And we are going to have a go just with the adjustment screw a bit later on and see if we can take some of that creep out of there. One thing I will also mention is, of course, the rifle comes with a scope. Now, a lot of package scopes, it's usually a case of you get the cheapest thing available, and it's something that you get either a fixed zoom, so you get a 4x32. Some of them can be quite nice, actually. I will say that if you don't mind a more basic scope. You can get a 4x32, or you will most of the time get fixed parallax. With this, you get basically a lot of what you want. So you've got one piece mount, which is a lovely addition. I do like that. The other thing is you also get adjustable parallax on the front end, eye relief, and you've also got obviously your zoom as well. So that I really like. One thing I will mention, two things actually. These are not locking turrets, they're just pretending to look like them. They are finger adjustable though, if you can hear that, and that is a nice positive click on there too. The other thing I'd say is it is a duplex reticle. It's not a mil dot, but it's actually quite a fine mil dot, duplex, apologies. Quite a fine duplex reticle. It's not as fine as your conuses that we use on this channel, like the Pro 3 number 32, but it's not bad at all. You could easily, comfortably use it. I mean, we've got the target a bit further out at the minute, about 30 odd yards, and I'm not losing the bullseye at 30 yards. So beyond that, maybe spec yourself up, but we'll see how this does in the accuracy testing. So overall, yeah, I like it. I'm genuinely a big fan, and like I said, I always wanted to review this as soon as I saw the pictures. So am I upset? Is it a case of don't meet your heroes? Well, not for me at the minute, but let's carry on to chronograph testing and see what we think. So let's whack the chronograph out and let's get some actual data in front of us and see what the gun's doing. It should be full power, but is it? Okay, so future Dan here, just with a quick segue. So this is the part where normally I would show you what the trigger pull weight is with my funky little tool here. The problem is that Crosman, the evil geniuses, you can probably see, because of the safety design, I can't really get it on there. So sadly, you are just going to have to take my word for it regarding the trigger. So yeah, sorry about that. Blame Crosman. Anyways, back to past Dan. Okay, so accuracy testing time. You know how this goes. We've set the target up at 27 yards. We're going to run several different brands of pellets through the gun, see which one it groups best with. We're going to delete the footage of the terrible or just not very interesting groups to keep the runtime a bit more sensible, but we will obviously show the interesting ones and also the ones that are the best. After this, we'll move on to 45 yards and see how the rifle can do there when we really stretch its legs. Weather-wise, there is a little bit of breeze blowing around. We get the occasional strong gust, but hopefully it shouldn't be too much to affect the grouping. At least, I wouldn't say definitely not too much at 27 yards. We will try it off the rest. However, we will also try it offhand if we get better groups that way. Some spring guns can be a little funny with rests, with how they bounce and such like that. So we'll try it both ways to give the rifle the best chance, as we always do. So that's it for the run-up to accuracy testing. It's time to get the rifle in the shoulder and actually get it done now. So that's 27 yards accuracy testing out the way and done with. So how did we get on? Well, as mentioned, we actually have 3 groups on 2 cards. We managed the first group where you see we had a couple of flyers, but then after that we managed quite a nice solid group just above the ball, which I was very happy with. The second group, I thought, I'm not happy with that, so we're going to go again. But again, leave the footage up there. You can see how the gun behaves. And of course, a better shot, I'm sure, would do even better with it. So after that, we put a second piece of card down, and I thought there and then, do you know what? Let's really go at it. And we ended up with a really nice group, then a flyer, which I was not happy with. So I decided to murder the flyer by making another group there. And then I think off memory, I think I carried on with the second group. I'm not 100% certain. And we did also get one crazy flyer, which I thought, do you know what? That's me being humbled, because we got 2 really nice groups on paper, or on card, I should say. And I'm pretty impressed. And that is with the standard scope as well. So there's no trickery. I've not put a great big conus on there or anything like that. That's with the package scope. So with that out of the way, and elbows on knees as well, may I add. But with that out of the way, let's move on now to 45 yards accuracy testing, and let's see how we get on. So with the 45 yards accuracy testing out of the way, what do we think of the Crosman Summit? I really quite like it, but with a caveat I'm sure you can see coming. Negatives out of the way first, as always with our reviews, and as we say, no rifle is perfect. The main letdown for me is the trigger. It's the same plain Jane budget unit that's been doing the rounds for years now. Don't get me wrong, it's far from the worst I've ever used, and it's not a heavy trigger, at least like some on the market, but it's the fact that it's creepier than a Scooby-Doo villain is what lets it down. Now it must be said that it's very, very easy to tune these triggers, and even just a longer adjustment screw helps them tremendously and turns them into a genuinely nice unit. The other thing I'll mention is that there is a bit of twang on the go during the shot cycle, but it's no worse than any Vire I've shot, if we're being honest. So with that out of the way, now on to the good stuff. For starters, the Summit is a seriously pretty gun. It's slightly let down by the plastic trigger and trigger guard, but in general this is a classy looking rifle. Many may disagree with this, but I think if this had a gold trigger blade and metal guard, you'd have one of the prettiest rifles on the market. The other good news is that this is also most certainly a full power air gun, and fairly consistent through the chrono as well, especially for an out-of-the-box gun. The other nice addition is the scope and one-piece mount included with the package. It genuinely sits pretty well against most of the entry-level scopes from Hawk and Nico Sterling. I'm also pleased to report that there was 0 scope creep throughout my testing. The mount did its job perfectly. Accuracy and potential accuracy was another high point. The rifle flirted with half-inch groups at 27 yards and managed a sub-1-inch group at 45 yards if we eliminate that flyer. For a £170 rifle, that's pretty impressive. In total, I think it's a really smart rifle. Now, I usually hate the term value for money, as in some instances that's used when something is, well, let's face it, a bit crap but cheap. But considering most of the rifle's competition are using the exact same trigger, and you get a genuinely competent scope and mount on top of a gun capable of half-inch groups at almost 30 yards for less than £200, I think we can say this is genuinely excellent value for money rifle, and with an absolute ton of potential to go with it. It just needs a good screw. And don't we all sometimes? And with that out of the way, that wraps up this episode of Big Dan's Airguns. I'm a big fan of the gun, like we said. Just bear in mind, the trigger isn't exactly a record or CD unit from an Air Arms. Thanks ever so much to Rangerite for sending us this rifle for review. If you're an RFD looking to expand your product line, I couldn't recommend them enough. They're a fantastic team with some excellent products too. So now I've done that, can you make Kral make a walnut thumbhole break barrel? Pretty, please. Come on, I just told people you were nice. Don't walk away. Come on, I got some excellent ideas. What about a double barrel break barrel?